The Man Next to You. Original stories of ordinary people in extraordinary hours, the ones history forgets to name. Season 2, The Long Road Down. Episode 4, One Lane South. There was one road and Corporal Amos Greer drove it, and the whole division's life was the width of his front tires. That was the thing he could not stop thinking, hauling the truck down through the dark with his headlights black to slits and the mountain falling away into nothing off his right-hand mirror. There was one road, one, a single lane scratched into the side of the frozen peaks, switching back and forth down the mountain toward the sea, and on that one lane was strung the entire trapped force, every man, every gun, every truck full of wounded. And if the road closed, if one vehicle slid off or burned or stopped in the wrong place, then everything behind it stopped too, and a stopped column at 30 below with the enemy in the hills was a column that died. The road had to stay open. The road had to keep moving. And the road tonight was him. "How we doing back there?" he called over his shoulder into the canvas dark of the truck bed, where the wounded were stacked. He couldn't see them. He could hear them, the ones who could still make sound. "Y'all hanging in? We're going downhill now. That's the good news. Downhill means toward the ocean." "Toward warm," a voice from the back, thin. "Just drive, brother. Just keep it on the road." "That's the plan," Greer said. "That is the entire plan." He was 22 years old and from a flat, warm country that had never imagined a place like this. And he had joined a corps that, 2 years back, a president's signature had finally ordered to stop sorting men by the color of them. And so here he was, a black Marine driving white Marines and black Marines and the dying of both down a mountain in Korea. And up here he'd found the cold did the thing the order was still struggling to do down below. It did not care. The cold took everybody the same. The mountain wanted all of them equally. There was a brutal democracy to it that Greer had not expected and could not have explained to his mother. And in the worst moments, it was almost a comfort that out here, finally, the only thing that mattered about a man was whether he kept his interval and took care of the man next to him. The road was a catalog of ways to die, and Greer had learned all of them by heart. There was the ice. Black ice, the worst kind, invisible, the truck wanting to swap ends on every switchback with 1,000-foot nothing waiting on the downhill side. You drove it in a gear too low off the brakes, touched the brakes on that ice, and you were gone, letting the engine hold you back. Hands so light on the wheel it was more like praying than steering. There was the dark, blacked out lights because lights drew fire, so you drove a deadly mountain road by the faint smear of the cat's eye markers on the truck ahead. And when the truck ahead vanished around a bend, you drove for a few seconds on memory and faith alone. And there was the enemy. They held the high ground above the road in places, and they would open up on the column out of the black. And this was the part that turned Greer's stomach to water, because a rifleman who's ambushed can shoot back, can get down, can do something, and a truck driver on a one-lane mountain road can do exactly nothing. You couldn't stop. Stopping closed the road, killed everyone behind you. You couldn't turn off, there was nowhere to turn. You could only do the one thing, the unbearable thing. Keep both hands on the wheel and keep driving, straight through it, at the same steady crawl, a stationary target moving in slow motion, and trust that the men on the trucks with guns and the airplanes the daylight brought would keep the hills off you long enough to get through. "You are never so safe as when you are moving," somebody had told him once in another life, at a motor pool in a warm country. "Never so vulnerable as when you're still." He hadn't understood it then. He understood it now in his spine, on a mountain, with the wounded stacked behind him and the road his only friend in the world. Keep moving. Moving was life. Moving was the whole prayer. The fire came at the worst switchback, the tight one where the road doubled back on itself and slowed everything to a crawl. It came down off the high ground to the left, the muzzle flashes stitching the dark, and Greer heard it walk across the canvas behind him, that flat, tearing sound of rounds going through the truck bed. And a man back there cried out, and every instinct in Greer's 22-year-old body screamed, "Stop, get down, get out." And he did not. He could not. There were 40 trucks behind him on that road, and every one of them carried wounded, and every one of them would stop if he stopped. And so Corporal Amos Greer gripped the wheel until his frozen hands ached, and he kept the truck at its same slow crawl through the kill zone, talking the whole time, because talking was the only thing left to do. We're okay. We're okay back there. I got you. I'm not stopping. You hear me? I am not stopping. We're going to drive right through it. Just hold on. Hold on. A round took out his side mirror in a spray of glass. Another punched through the up and out the other side, and he felt the wind of it. He kept driving. On the high ground above, somebody's machine gun was answering now, hammering up at the flashes. And then from somewhere, a flare went up and turned the snow to silver. And the fire from the hill faltered, and Greer drove out the far side of the switchback with his heart going like a trip hammer, and the wounded still alive behind him. Most of them, please God, most of them. Talk to me back there. Somebody talk to me. Still here, the thin voice. You crazy, beautiful man, still here. Greer let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for a year. Downhill, he said to himself, to them, to the road. Still downhill, still toward the ocean. We're okay. He passed them on the road, all of them, the whole season strung out along the one lane in the dark. And going slow as he was, he saw them the way you see faces from a train. He passed a squad of riflemen walking, bent under their packs, a big sergeant at the front with his head up, watching the hills, and a kid behind him stumbling with exhaustion, and the sergeant reaching back without looking to steady the kid by the strap. And Greer slowed and called out, "Y'all want to throw the wounded any room? I got..." And the sergeant called back, hoarse, "We're walking. Drive on. Get those boys to the strip." And Greer drove on, and didn't know he'd just spoken to Hennessy, and Hennessy didn't know he'd just waved on the truck that was keeping his own wounded alive. And that was the shape of it. That was always the shape of it. The men who kept each other alive and never traded names. He passed an aid station, a scrape behind a rock wall, a corpsman bent over a litter line loading the hurt onto trucks like his, and the corpsman lifted a hand as a Greer rolled past, and Greer lifted one back. He passed the refugees, and that was the thing that broke something in him and put it back together different. Civilians, old men and women and children, hundreds of them, thousands, strung along the edges of the road in the killing cold, fleeing south alongside the army, carrying babies in bundles, walking because there was nothing else to do and nowhere else to go. The war having decided to happen in the middle of their lives. Greer had a truck full of dying soldiers and no room, and an order to keep moving, and he could not stop, and it tore at him and the children's faces in his slit headlights, and he did the only thing he could, which was to drive a little to the left, to keep his wheels off the edge where they walked, to not be one more thing on that road that hurt them. It wasn't enough. Nothing up here was ever enough. You did the next thing and the next thing, and you let not enough be what you could live with, or it ate you. He reached the strip near dawn, the impossible strip the engineers had carved into the frozen bowl, transport planes squatting on it with their props turning, taking the wounded away south, and Marines came running to offload the truck bed, and Greer climbed down on legs that didn't work and stood in the prop wash and watched them carry his cargo to the planes. The thin-voiced man went by on a litter and caught his eye and lifted 2 fingers, a little salute, "You crazy, beautiful man." And then he was on the plane, and the plane was lifting, and Greer would never know his name or whether he lived. "Greer," his sergeant down the line, voice cracked with no sleep. "Truck's empty, fuel's topped. We got more wounded up at the perimeter and one road to bring 'em down. You good to turn around and do it again?" Turn around, drive back up the mountain against the current of the whole retreating column to load more dying men and bring them down the one lane through the ice, in the dark, in the fire. Again, because the road had to stay open and the road had to keep moving. And somebody had to be the one who kept it moving. Amos Greer looked up the mountain at the long, dark road, and then he looked at the planes lifting his wounded away south toward the warm, toward the living, and he found the thing in himself that he'd come all this way to find without knowing he was looking for it. That when there was nothing to do but keep both hands on the wheel and drive straight through the worst of it, he could. That he was a man who held the road open. "Yeah, Sarge," he said, and climbed back up into the cab. "Yeah, let's go get him. 1 lane south, I know the way." He put the truck in gear and turned it back toward the mountain, the loneliest and most necessary direction there was, up into the dark to bring more of them down. The road that was a man's front tires wide. The road that the whole division's life was strung along, kept open one slow crawl at a time by a 22-year-old who would not stop. You've been listening to The Man Next to You. These people are fictional. What they carried was not. If this story stayed with you, leave it where someone else might find it, and come back next week for the next one. Until then, take care of the man next to you.